Yep.
Okay. Alright. Okay, excited na ako dito. Grabe. Ayun, ladies and gentlemen, after a long time, na-invite na natin si aking good friend, si Attorney Moses Florendo, for an interview um, about a lot of things, particularly on Marcos cases. So ipakilala ko, actually stellar ang record ni Attorney Moses. Pero gusto niya ipakilala ko siya as the former Associate Solicitor at the Office of the Solicitor General. Okay, I think maraming questions about that. So can you give me a bit of background about yourself?
All right. Floyd, thanks so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to have this platform to inform people about a lot of issues that are very relevant today. So I was a former Philippine lawyer. I work with the Office of the Solicitor General, and I was fortunate to have handled a lot of very interesting cases. Right? So growing up as a kid, syempre, parang namulat tayo dun sa EDSA revolution, naabutan natin yon, and my parents would always talk about it, and I was very interested. In fact, growing up, ang lagi kong dala pag umaga yung dyaryo ng tatay ko. But pinabasa ko muna, and then I sent it to him, and I asked him questions. So very curious ako na bata. And then I took up law, and na-realize ko nung naging abogado ko, may sinabi sa amin yung teacher namin dati nung college na maraming abogado pero konti ang abogadong nag-work for the government. So naisip ko, okay, government service ang papasukin ko. And despite what people think about the civil service, yung mga empleyado ng gobyerno, sa totoo lang, I realized that I have more respect for civil servants when I left than when I entered. Kasi pagpasok mo, syempre, may perception ka about how government works, right? Negatively. Pero paglabas mo, naisip mo, nga, no? Ang daming taong dapat na irespeto natin na talagang tumutulong sa gobyerno, talaga na very selfless. So that's my brief background. So, yep.
Maraming salamat. Actually, thank you very much talaga for sa pagpapa-unlock ng interview. Actually, matagal ko nang gustong gawin to. Pero I think the entire political situation calls for this exchange of ideas, particularly sa pag-run ni Bong-bong Marcos. And I understand you personally handled cases against the Marcoses. Can you give me an idea of how about those cases or anything about it?
Right. So ako siguro sinuwerte lang ako kasi by the time na pumasok ako sa Solicitor General's office, yung team na napasukan ko, talagang very involved sila sa mga cases, right? So, yung OSG, ang work niya is lawyer siya ng government, right? Government agencies. Yung divisions saan ako involved, hawak nila mga PCGG cases. I'd like to, as I said, right, to be sort of like, be presented as a lawyer for the government, knowing na yung mga kasong to hindi umusad, hindi naging successful without people who preceded me and people who succeeded me. Maliit lang yung parte ko. So, ang role ko today is to explain to you how this all happened. Pero I give a lot of credit to those who were ahead of me. Yung mga dinatnan ko abogado, mga naging boss ko, at saka yung mga naging boss nila. Right? This whole thing all started in 1986. And ang pinaka-important timeline dito is 1991. Right? I will explain later how it happened. So, ganon yung naging flow. And I'm very happy and very thankful na ganon yung naging participation ko sa government.
So, I understand at that time, 1991, you were working with the OSG. And, oh, no.
Not yet. Not yet. All right. So,
sorry.
yeah, that was the time na very important sa lahat ng Marcos cases is 1991. So, that's why I want to give respect to those who were there at that time and those who filed those cases, yes.
Okay. So when did you start working with the OSG pala?
Oh, 2007. 2007.
2007. Okay. 2007 under kay Frank Chavez, am I correct?
No, that's 2007. Technically under kay Solgen Natura, pero nag-meet lang kami. Nag-abot lang yung timeline namin for about a few hours because right after I was employed, he was appointed Supreme Court Justice. Right?
Whoa.
So I remember kasi what they call this one, I was on my way to work, tas siya pinag-apply ako sa OSG, and then the HR called me, sabi nila, attorney, pumunta na po kayo ngayon kasi kung hindi pa kayo mag-oath ngayon or something, matatagalan po bago ma-process. So takbo na ako doon sa OSG sa Makati. Tapos winelcome ako ni Soldier Natura. He was very gracious at sinabi niya, Iho, people come, people go. You're in, I'm out. Nung pala, very busy yung office, and nung pala may announcement that he was appointed as Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. So I started 2007. It was a very good experience. And I'm happy, kumbaga yun ang highlight ng aking career sa Pilipinas, being part of that very prestigious organization and a government agency.
So, nag-start si Chief Justice Natura, and then pumalit sa kanya si Chavez.
De Vanadera. Chavez
Vanadera.
was 1986.
1986. Okay.
So Soljan Chavez was 1986 to 1992. But it's worth mentioning him because the bulk of the cases were filed during his time.
Ah,
right?
okay. Medyo kasi tumatak sa akin si Chavez kasi dahil I met him personally back in Action Demokratiko.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, in Cebu. So, sobrang bait na tao. Tapos, sobrang niya lively. Kumakain siya ng isang buong lechon. Nag-order siya ng buong lechon for the entire team. So, may talk siya sa isang hotel somewhere sa Cebu. Tapos, doon kami sa kwarto niya. Tapos, may nagpasok na isang buong lechon. Tapos, nilalagtakan niya yung balat. Sarap talaga ng balat ng lechon. So, biglang, the entire time, in-expect ko, sabi ko, ayun yung memory ko ni Chavez, and then, yeah. So, okay. So, what made you decide to work with the OSG pala? Of all, after ka nag-graduate, ano yung decision mo?
Right. So, when I passed law school, inisip ko, nagplano ako, ano bang gusto kong gawin sa buhay ko? Because I was very fortunate to have passed the bar. I think back in the days, masyadong mababa yung passing percentage ng bar. I think 20% during my time.
Wow.
Right? And it doesn't say that those who did not are less, but the thing is the circumstances were right for me, right? In fact, sideline, I feel ang nangyayari sa bar is more than an intellectual contest, more of emotional siya. Those who have more pressure don't make it, right? Those who could not control the pressure and stress, they don't make it. But I have high respects for those the 80% usually who don't. But ganun. So I planned something for myself. Ano bang gusto ko? Gusto ko mag-private practice nun. Gusto ko maging private litigator, prestigious. That's where the money is at that time. But then I realized na parang going back doon sa sinabi ng teacher ko, try government kasi parang konti ang umaano sa gobyerno. And if I want to do good, syempre dapat alam mo yung rules, right? So 4 years of law school, that's preparation but not sufficient. So sabi ko, kung gusto mong maging practicing in the future or even like a good government lawyer, I should know the rules. So I started as clerk of court sa Manila. Right? So pag clerk of court ka, ikaw yung parang kanang kamay ng judge. Right? So every judge, meron siyang staff, stenographer, sheriff, and so on, tas legal researcher, tas clerk of court. Ikaw yung, kumbaga, office manager at the same time, you help the judge. Yung iba, they entrust the clerk of court to help them draft decisions and do research. So, malalaman mo yung law or how justice is rendered from the bench, right? From the side ng court. So, sabi ko, okay, I think good experience. So, after 2 years, I decided to apply sa OSG. Dahil ang sabi ng boss ko sa akin, kung gusto mong maging magaling sa pagsulat and even litigation and still work for the government, you could either go to PAO, sa Fiscal's Office, Prosecutor, or sa OSG. So I said, parang interesting yung OSG, kaya I joined OSG.
And luckily, nabanatan mo yung mga kaso ni Marcos. So, ano yung mga cases na nahawakan mo particularly?
Right. I think ako, I was fortunate to be part of the team na nag-handle ng first yung ang unang case na nabigay sa amin is yung sa jewelry. Okay? So background, bakit 1991 yung important? This will answer a lot of questions. Kasi lumalabas ang daming questions parang bakit daw sinasabing magnanakaw? May patunayan ba? Bakit walang nakaw lang? this is all kumbaga, very relevant questions, right? Whether you're for or against, very relevant questions. 1991 kasi dalawang aspect pag halimbawa merong ginawang isang tao, right? Lalo na legally. Usually civil or criminal. So pag halimbawa nangurakot ka or something, pwede kang kasuhan ng Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act, okay yan. So, ang ending niyan is kukulong ka, right? Pag nahatulan ka, kukulong ka, or pagbabayarin ka. There's another way. Yung civil aspect din is pagbabayarin ka ng nakuha mo, right? So, kaya 1991 is very important because may tayong batas called civil forfeiture. Pag yung assets mo as declared sa SALN mo exceeds yung actual assets mo exceeds yung SALN mo, lahat ng sumobra sa SALN deemed by law ill-gotten. Ibig sabihin, kino-consider ng batas yan, lahat ng lumampas sa SALN mo, nanakaw na yaman. Right? No, this is true for government, public officials and employees. Pero may limit siya, 4 years lang. Right? So from 4 years from the time that you leave office, doon lang sa period na pwedeng i-file tong forfeiture na to. Ginawa tong forfeiture na to noong 1955 kasi parang nahihirapan silang ma-pin down yung mga tao for Corrupt Practices Act. Right? Of course, due process, evidence, mataas ang level ng evidence dyan at the same compared sa civil. Ang civil kasi preponderance of evidence. Kumbaga, napatunayan mo lang pero pag beyond reasonable doubt, mas mataas na level yon. So sabi ng mga mambabatas natin noong 1955, okay, our country is ripe with corruption, so let's have this civil forfeiture. Para kung hindi man natin sila mapakulong, makuha natin yung pera. Right? So, kaya nila ginawang 4 years kasi back in the days, pag presidente ka, ang term of office mo ay 4 years with re-election.
Yeah.
Otherwise, pag hinabaan mo to, lalabas yan na witch hunting lang. Right? So, yun ang iniiwasan nila. So, striking a balance between getting what the public should have at the same time, hindi ka mag-witch hunting. So they deem it like 4 years is enough. Okay. So 1986, 87, 88, 1991, 4 years. Sumakto si Frank Chavez. He had an issue before with PCGG, but that's for another story. So siya ang nag-file. Right? Civil case 141 sa Sandigan Bayan. Any cases, corruption cases involving this level, presidente, Sandigan Bayan yan. Kasi Sandigan Bayan naka-file. Special court yan for public officials for graft and corruption. So, final na doon. And sa petition niya, sinasabi niya, ito lang yung assets ng mga Marcos. Pero ito yung properties niya. He listed out so many things. And most of them don't have the value, but they have the description. And that is sufficient enough sa batas. Right? So, ang first case na hawakan ko dito is Arelma case. So, ang ginawa nila Marcos before from I think 68 until like 70s and 80s, gumawa sila ng mga foundation overseas. Right? They use cronies and dummies. Para natin ito nalaman. Okay. Kasi nung umalis sila Marcos, may naiwan siyang diary called the Marcos Diary. Si Marcos is being a what they call this one, lawyer na very detailed. Sinulat niya. Ito yung mga ginawa ko, ito yung sinabi ko, inutos ko. Plus, although hindi siya complete, di ba? Yung mga foreign entities like Switzerland, they have all these records. Right? So, kulangin man tayo dito. Kaya, ang first decision against them was Switzerland, hindi naman dito eh. So, kulangin man tayo dito, meron doon. So, dahil una, makikita mo kung sino ang beneficiary. In one foundation, ang beneficiary, Imelda and the children. Right? So, obviously, it's from Ferdinand Sr. So, yung Arelma case is, inutusan niya isa niyang kaibigan ni Marcos na maggawa ng isang foundation which ended up in Panama.
Yeah,
right?
Panama
In
Papers.
between in between North and Central America, right? And so North and South America, central talaga siya. That's where the Panama Canal is. Kasi tax haven yon. And as you said, right, Panama Papers, nagpugad nga siya ng mga gawang illegal. Right? So, if you want to invest doon, walang masyadong sisilip or something. And then, ito from the Panama Foundation, may deposit sa Merrill Lynch sa New York. Right? I think roughly about 3.5 million back in 83. 3.5 million, right? So, yun, na-invest na siya. Ngayon, pinagtatalunan yan. Kaya naging kaso yan is, unfortunately, parang mahirap, kumbaga, this is not the situation we envision having a fight. Nagkiklaim ang human rights victims, right? Kiniklaim din nila, or kiniklaim ni Marcos nila Bong-bong yun. Sinasabi nila, ano yung sinasabi nila sa Facebook na ang kasalanan ng tatay, hindi kasalanan ng anak. But he was the one actively involved in this case, si Bong-bong.
Wow.
Doon sa ninako ng tatay niya, right? So, in fact, nung nakating sa Supreme Court, siya yung one of the main parties against the government. Now, so, nag-deposit sa Merrill Lynch ng 3.5 million. Hinahabol ng human rights claimants, hinahabol ni Marcos, at syempre hinahabol ng government. Ang position ng government is that yung ginawa ni Marcos ng human rights is not a government thing. It's by himself. Right? So, and plus, may assets siya. So, dapat dun yung kunin. I think the thing of the government was para lalong ma-expose how much the money really was taken, because until now we couldn't give a figure.
So the
right?
10 billion
So,
is just a rough estimate.
It's a rough estimate of what we know, right?
Whoa.
I remember this. We had this conversation that you asked me is magkano. Sabi ko, you know what? It's 10 billion plus. We don't know. These are the things na lang na alam natin because may information from foreign sources at the same time naiwan niyang documents sa Malacanang. All others we don't know, right? So masingit lang. Sabi nila, oh, bakit hindi natin alam ganyan? Okay, from 72 martial law to 86, right? He was dictator. Siya nag-a-appoint ng Commission on Audit. Siya ang nag-a-appoint ng nasa Department of Justice, nasa Judiciary. So sinong sisilip, sino magka-file? O maybe Congress. Pero but that time, sinarado niya ang Congress. Right? Walang Senate investigation, nothing. So ang ginawa, under the Constitution, kung saan siya, yung bagong Constitution, merong batasang pambansa composed of House and Senate. Right? Yung old House and Senate, sila yung temporary. Hindi niya ginawa yon. Nagpa-referendum siya, tapos the referendum says siya ang mag-a-appoint or siya ang magde-determine kung sino. That's called the interim batasang pambansa. These are his appointees. So how will they investigate him? Moving forward, ito time ni Ninoy na tumakbo siya sa batasang pambansa. Overwhelming majority members ng batasan. So who will investigate him? Right? So all levers na dapat na-check sa presidente, legislature, control niya, prosecutors, appointees niya, auditors, appointees niya. So, no wonder wala tayong ganong wala tayong substantial evidence na hawak, right, sa Pilipinas, right? But the thing is, because of foreign governments, foreign courts, nalaman natin. Diba? Sa Pilipinas on its own, kung hindi niya naiwan yung diary niya, we would not really know most of the, what we call this, the things that he stole, right? I think that, diba, I think ang nadali rin siya because of their, what they call this one, their lifestyle. Namimili ng mansion. So it's reported, right? So tapos pag titignan mo, teka, lagpas to sa salin mo, and that's how government went it. So that's what Frank Chavez did. So knowing how much he filed, so paano na ni Frank Chavez nalaman kung magkano yung pera niya? Siya pinag-submit ng statement of assets si Marcos. This was under the law that they should file. But he did not file it all throughout his term. Right? So ang lumalabas lang na pera niya is, I think, 300,000 as of 1986, legitimately. Kinompute ng government. Okay? 300,000 US dollars. Okay? Sasabihin nila, oh, teka, baka naman may ibang dagdag. Di sana kung may dagdag siyang trabaho or something, nilagay niya sa salin. At the same time, hindi rin siya pwede magtrabaho kasi pag presidente ka, marami kang limitations. Hindi ka pwede mag-engage ng private practice, private business, or any other employment because of conflict of interest. So, very clear yung computation ng Supreme Court. Magkano lang kita nilang mag-asawa? 300,000 from 65 to 85. Yun lang ang kita nila. Diba? Kaya sinasabi ng Supreme Court, based on the law, ayon sa Civil Forfeiture Act, lahat ng kitain mo or assets mo outside of that is considered as nakaw. Kasi hindi saan mo nakuha. Diba? The law only allows you to have this much income dahil presidente ka. and then you're saying you have billions. So the law itself deems it ill-gotten, right? So what Chavez did was listed all of this, or everything na meron tayong ebidensya, he enumerated jewelry, so on, paintings, and then he filed it in 1991, right? So ang case ko, as I said, yung Arelma was dahil lumabas to na, I think parang nasa Merrill Lynch, tapos biglang naging subject of controversy, kaya pumasok ang government to claim it. Right? That was the first case. So, very, what you call it, very consequential siya kasi nag-hearing, I was sent with some colleagues sa Washington, D.C. to assist yung US lawyers. Kasi Philippine lawyers, I don't have a license to practice in Washington, D.C. So we were assisting big-time lawyers there. Now, March yung hearing sa Supreme Court, and binigay sa yung decision sa atin is June 12, 2008. And I actually, in anticipation, I prepared a draft press statement. Si Soljan de Vanedera said was, you know what, sige, ilabas natin siya na parang on the occasion of our Independence Day, the US Supreme Court did this, so on. So it was very consequential because of the date. So we were able to recover, I think, 3.3 million plus interest US. It's small, right? Pero kasi yun ang ginamit natin sa ibang mga cases natin overseas, sa Singapore, sa West LB case, na justification.
May precedent
Why
na,
it should be
kumbaga.
given to us.
Oo.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So
So
if I may ask, sorry to cut you off, if I may ask, aware si Marcos sa existing na SALN na would work against him and yet he's doing it?
the lawyer that he is, just I think he was aware. Pero I think after 65 or 66, hindi na siya nagbigay ng SALN. Right?
Oh.
But they were mandated by the Anti-Graft Practices Act to file it. Right? So
Yeah.
doon siya nadali. Parang kaya I don't know, back in 86 you keep on hearing the words ill-gotten wealth from Salonga. That's it.
Yeah.
Yun ang sinasabi niya na ang presumption ng batas is saan mo ba kukunin yan? Bawal ka nga magtrabaho. 'Di ba?
Yeah.
Bawal kang tumanggap ng anything. Tapos bigla ka nagkaroon ng pera. 'Di ba? So it's the law itself considers it, categorizes that income as ill-gotten and should be forfeited in favor of the government. So I don't know if you remember yung nangyari kay Senator Bong Revilla. So na-acquit siya doon sa PDAF. Pero ang pinipilit ng mga tao, I don't know if the ombudsman filed this one, yung forfeiture ng pera na yon. Diba? Hundreds of millions, I don't know if they did that, but they should have done it. Remember, meron kang period na 4 years from the time he left office at that time. So that's for some other time, but that's one thing that they should just keep in mind. Merong limitation yan. Pag hindi na na-file yan, paso na.
You mentioned about the SALN because this is a big issue. I mean, for the past 5 years, Duterte hasn't been submitting his SALN at all. Bakit may case bang pwede ma-file sa kanya? Kasi sabi mo mandated by law. But that doesn't mean na pag mandated, sabihin, wala bang ngipin yun?
What they call mandated to file, but iba yung to release to the public. Right? Kasi ang binabalansa naman natin dyan, again, is yung privacy ng tao. Right? So, but kasi masyadong mapagtiwala yung system natin na pag wala kang kasalanan, ilalabas mo. Diba? Parang that's the expectation. In this case, it's enough for public officials just to submit the SALN and leave it to investigators. Otherwise naman, ang mangyayari dyan is parang magiging fishing expedition. Isa-isahin nila, itong property na tangan without any evidence. Right? So, maganda yung sistema natin in the sense na napoprotektahan yung rights ng mga tao na nagfa-file. Pero at the same time, problematic kasi dependent yan sa public officials yan, sa good faith nila. Right?
Yeah, pwede rin siya maabuso.
And so presidente, right? So ang dapat na nag-handle ng mga ganyang issue yung ombudsman. But the thing is, the person who appoints the ombudsman is the president, right? So very disappointing na yung ombudsman was saying lately na baguhin niya batas, punish people who inquire or publish, something like that. Which is, ang purpose nga niyan is parang maging transparent ka eh. Diba? Tapos biglang, to my mind, it bothers me. It's sort of like self-defeating.
Yeah,
right? Very
bakit ang
self-defeating.
presidente ang nagpa-appoint sa ombudsman? Ba't ganun yung system na set up? For what reason?
Okay. Okay. Ang presidente ay dalawa ang role. Actually, three main roles, right?
Mhm.
Yung first, that's put aside, which is like commander-in-chief ng armed forces.
Yeah.
Okay. Yung second is head of government. Siya yung nagpapatakbo ng gobyerno. Okay. Yung pangatlo, head of state. Kumbaga, siya yung pinakapuno ng gobyerno. Okay. So, in most countries, ang head of state, sila ang nag-a-appoint ng tawag dito, ministers of state or yung mga ganyan, di ba? So, dalawa. Usually, sa ganyan, merong queen or president na nag-a-appoint. Tapos may prime minister na political, siya nagpapatakbo. In our case, ginaya natin yung America, we joined them together. Head of state and head of government. Right? So, siya na nagmamanage, tapos siya pa nag-a-appoint ng mga ganitong high profile constitutional offices. Right? So, well, that's the system we're stuck with. So, I think that's one thing that we should consider for constitutional reform. Dahil kung naalala mo, nung umupo si, what they call this one, si President Aquino, napilitang mag-resign si Ombudsman Mercedes Gutierrez.
Mhm.
Right? I think that was a bad precedent. It was a bad precedent because the office was not sort of respected because independent yan eh. Diba? Kung final mo ng impeachment. But then again, ang impeachment kasi it's political pero it should be used sparingly. Look what happened to, unfortunately, kay Chief Justice Corona, right? Very ironic kasi yung sinabi ko sa yung case kanina, civil case number 152154, ang sumulat nun si Chief Justice Corona na sinasabi niya na ang assets sa mga Marcos 300,000, 18 in excess sa gobyerno. That was Chief Justice Corona. Right? And saan siya yes, nadali siya sa salin. Diba? Nadali siya sa salin. So, very, very ironic. Right? Although sa kanya, that's for another discussion, but his was very minor. Right? Could have been corrected. Right? But that's for another thing. But that was I think the worst contribution of the Aquino administration was like the impeachment of Chief Justice Corona.
Yeah.
It was because what happened next? CJ Sereno for the same thing, right? So it wasn't good for the system. So anyway, so balik tayo. So Ariel case. So explanation is simple. Marcos during that time asked his dummy, I think it was Roberto Benedicto, set up a foundation, landed in Panama, and then that foundation had 3.3 million, pinasok nila sa Merrill Lynch. Ngayon, lumabas yan kasi pinag-aawayan ng human rights claimants, and then ni Marcos, and then entered the government. Right? Medyo sensitive yan kasi ang sinasabi nila is dapat i-prioritize yung human rights victims and so on. I feel for them. Pero the policy was, you know what, that's government first. Let the government decide what to do with it. At the same time, ang sinasabi ng government, may iba pa namang assets ang mga Marcos, edi habulin nyo. Right? But what the government did, because of, I think they had previous dealings with the State Department of the US, kaya nagkaroon tayo ng human rights compensation law ng time ni President Aquino. Right? Kaya kinompensate nila yung mga victims using part of that money. Right? So, yun ang nangyari. So, instead of human rights getting it, kinuha ng government and then, but that's very political. As a lawyer, sumunod lang kami dun sa batas, and that's it. It's up to like Congress to determine what to do next with that one. Right?
Yeah.
So, second case, Marcos Jewelry. Now, very interesting. Si Mrs. Marcos, mahilig, of course, mahilig siya sa alahas, right? So what she did back in the days was, pag nagpo-foreign travel siya, she would buy jewelry, right? May nag-alok, may nagsabi, then she buy, all right. I think from 1970, what was that? 65 to like 85 or something. Let me look at the figures that she has. I think parang ang naggastos niya is parang $20 million, I think. Sa alahas, right? Sa pagbili ng alahas or something. So, merong $150,000 on record lang kasi hindi natin alam kung saan nakuha and magkano lahat. Ang alam lang natin yung mga naiwan sa Malacanang. So story ng alas, paano natin nalaman at paano natin nakita. Okay? So ang first is paano niya kinuha. So every time she goes abroad or something, she amasses those jewelry, right? But God knows how much and where some of these collections are. So yung collections ni Mrs. Marcos ay naging kumbaga categorized into 3, all right? So when they left Malacanang in 86, may dala sila sa US na mga alahas. Dinala nila sa Hawaii. Ngayon, kinonfiscate yan ng customs, US Customs sa Hawaii. Right? So that is called the Hawaii collection. Okay. Yung mga naiwan niya sa Malacanang, it's called the Malacanang collection. Okay? Yung nasa US Customs, forfeited and then transferred to the Philippines. So no need for court order, binalik yan because of customs laws. Okay? Automatic. Second, yung nasa Malacanang, yan ang naging subject ng case. Okay? Meron pang, bago yung subject ng case na Malacanang collection, meron pang isa, Remoliotes collection. Ito parang Greek national na kaibigan or affiliated kala Imelda. He tried to take the jewelries out of the country. Nasa bat siya sa NAIA. So yan, again, customs forfeited sa government. Ang wala na lang is yung Malacanang collection. So medyo hindi pa na-declare kung anong category siya. So I think back in 2009, si Mrs. Marcos sent a letter to PCGG asking, hey, wala pa kang determination sa alahas na yun, akin yan. Okay? So umalma ang gobyerno and then we filed a case for summary judgment, partial summary judgment sa Sandigan Bayan na i-forfeit, i-declare that it's in excess of their income na 300,000 kasi ang valuation, let me check, right? So remember, sinasabi ko, what we call this one, 300,000 lang legitimate income nila, US, 1986. Okay? 1991, may valuation yan from Christie's kasi pina-check natin yan eh. Right? It's about 5.3 million to 7.1 million. 1991 value. Right? So, medyo mataas yung value niya. Okay? That was 1991. That was the whole collection. Yung Malacanang collection, about 100,000 to 150,000, yun ang valuation sa kanya. So, tinanong ni Mrs. Marcos, sumulat siya. Sabi niya, isoli niyo sa akin kung wala kang determination. So, government filed a motion for summary judgment para i-declare na forfeited yan. So, eventually, after a long court process, hanggang sa Supreme Court, nakarating, sabi ng Supreme Court, tama yung 152-154, yung ginawa nila Justice Corona, forfeited yan in favor of the government. So, nabalik siya sa gobyerno. So, that's the second case. That's the Imelda Romualdez Marcos jewelry. So, hindi alam kung saan galing yung pera, hindi niya ma-justify or something, wala sa listahan niya, forfeited in favor of the government. Because imagine, 300,000 tapos ang alahas mo worth 5 million. Diba? So, by law, ang declaration niya is ill-gotten. Ang masakit niyan is, hindi lang siya simpleng pagnanakaw kasi may point na parang very insensitive siya. Kasi, I don't know. I don't know the accuracy, but there are a lot of receipts going around Facebook. And these were the times na binili niya yung alahas, and this was the time na merong famine sa Negros, right? And while she was partying and buying this jewelry, you had a famine, and a lot of people were going hungry. So, ang daming namatay. So, that's one of the things. That's why this is very political matter. So yun, so we discussed Arelma jewelry, and then yung pangatlo that I could speak of because I know a part of it is yung paintings. So I think yung kay Love Diaz yun na parang movie about Imelda na dinidiscuss na she collected, then she wanted a museum for this one. What happened was she asked certain friends to buy paintings from art houses in New York at dalhin sa kanya, right? So kaya natin alam yan kasi may mga resibo, plus these art houses have a catalog, business transactions, plus dito rin dinidisplay ni Imelda and so on. So doon natin na laman yan. Ngayon, we haven't filed a civil forfeiture, exact forfeiture case about this one, or exact summary judgment for this one until like 2014 or 2013. Oh, sorry, 2013, 2014, parang ganon. So, ang estimated value niya at that time, let me double check na, parang 24 million back in 85 or 86.
Oh
Right?
my
So,
God.
yeah, so nangongolekta. Ito nakakatawa. Ang sinasabi nila is, no, kinokolekt yan para investment ng Pilipinas or something. But then again, kung investment ng Pilipinas, bakit ikaw nag-decide? In what capacity? Hindi ka naman finance minister, hindi ka naman head ng central bank. Pero dahil siya ang first lady, tapos minister of human settlement, so on, syempre first lady, asawa ng dictator president, susundin siya. So, kumbaga nagtuturo siya, tapos pinapabili niya sa central bank, right? And then dinadala sa kanya, and she's claiming it as hers, right? At the time that we are having a financial crunch in 83, 84, 85, 86. So, yun ang masaklap doon. So, that's what they did. So, yun ang modus operandi nila. Mag-uutos sila, bibigay sa kanila, right? So, comes to the question, lagi na natatanong, bakit walang nakukulong? Diba? Kung nagnakaw, bakit walang nakukulong? As I explained, kung may pagnanakaw, dalawang pwedeng mangyari dyan. Either filean ka ng criminal case or civil case para bawiin. Criminal para panagutin ka at pagbayarin, civil para ibalik. Right? Now, I think noong 2018, na-convict si Imelda for organizing Swiss foundations. Ito yung Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act. Because you're not supposed to do things through dummies and so on, which she did. Remember, I told you, may mga kaibigan silang pinag-set up ng foundations for Swiss accounts. Doon siya nahuli. That was 2018. Now, sasabihin nila, ba't di nakulong? I think because what they call this one, she is already of age. Usually, pag 80, pinapalaya na pinapalabas na. Right? And parang 80 na siya something when this one happened. Right? But if she were like in her younger years, baka diretso kulungan siya. Okay? Kasi for humanitarian reasons, yung mga 8 years old, hindi na nila kinukulong. Right? And there's a lot of example for that. Now, paano si Ferdinand? Patay na si Ferdinand. 1989 patay. Di ba? 1989 pa lang patay na si Ferdinand. So, we could not expect him to have been convicted because he's dead. Di ba? Pag ang tao namatay, hahabulin mo yung estate. Kaya karamihan ng cases dito sa Supreme Court, ang pangalan niya, kumbaga, Republic versus the estate of Ferdinand Marcos because the man is dead. Right? At yung criminal liability niya, nawala na kasi patay na siya. Okay? So, kaya hindi sila nakulong dahil, una, patay na si Ferdinand, and then, as I explained earlier, hawak nila yung buong institutions of government, yung checks and balances, hawak nila yon, kaya walang na-file na case. And remember, I told you about the 4 years na period. Sa criminal, 10 years. But Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act, 10 years yung prescription. Paso na siya. Diba? Wala ka na ma-file. Right? So, that's the main reason why. Now, it doesn't mean na hindi siya nakulong, walang ninakaw. It's just saying that may namatay, pero walang pumatay. Right? May pinatay, pero walang pumatay. Parang, it doesn't make sense. So, mostly what we could say to people who said, bakit di nakulong? First, una, patay na si Ferdinand. Right? Pangalawa, Imelda's of age. Second, not enough cases kasi at that time, no one had the complete facts because they were in control of government. And most of the cases, or most of the information we have, either galing kay Ferdinand mismo or galing overseas. Right? So, lost na yung time na parang from 72 to 86, parang it's very difficult. May isang case interesting, yung kay Decini for parang undue influence in awarding the contract ng Bataan Nuclear Power Plant. Decini is a businessman. Siya ang naparusahan. He was ordered to pay 1 billion pesos. Pero businessman lang siya. Kaibigan niya si Ferdinand. So, as the DS would say, connect the dots. Right? But they could not convict Ferdinand because he's dead. Diba? So ang naparusahan na lang si Simi. He was ordered to pay ₱1 billion, right? But that Bataan nuclear power plant is sort of like the biggest single item na inutang natin na wala tayong napakinabangan, right? And they proposed a plan na rejected na, kaya hindi siya tinuloy ng government ni Mrs. Aquino, right? Imagine if that happened, tinuloy nila, and you had the Pinatubo, look at Fukushima, di ba? Earthquake, nuclear disaster could have happened to us, right? So, ayun, those are the three important cases na nahawakan ko about the Marcoses, yung Arelma, jewelry, and paintings. So, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. May follow-up question ako. Na-indict ba si Marcos sa US?
Na-indict sila, na-indict siya, pero hindi na siya nahatulan or hindi na siya natuloy kasi namatay na siya noong 89. Ang natuloy na lang nun, yung racketeering case yun, yung RICO case yun sa New York, na-acquit si Mrs. Marcos doon. Right? She was acquitted by a jury, right? So she was acquitted. So that's one thing, right?
Yeah. Kasi parang I remember a story. Kinento rin sa akin ng a former worker of nag-work sa government. Well, kwento lang din naman sa kanya ng mga contacts sa US. Ang sinabi niya, sabi ng mga FBI sa kanya, parang they have people around Marcos at that time. And then, ang kwento sa kanya was that nung nalaman na i-indict si Marcos and he has to appear in court, he ordered two Big Macs.
Yeah.
And then he ate them heartily so that ma-hospital siya. So I was like, when narinig ko yung kwento na yun, na-imagine ko, how could this, parang how much this man prides more about his name that he would be willing to suffer for it just not to appear in court.
Right, court.
Diba?
And be indicted.
Yeah.
I think what they call this one, I wish they could have been held more accountable than what we have now. Sana may nakulong or something. But I think that is relative. In the mind, sorry, I'm very careful with my words. Pero kasi sa akin, ang laking parusa yung nangyari sa kanila. Because all her life, like look at Imelda, all her life, Imelda wanted recognition. The way they were put it out was a slap on her face.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
All her life, she wanted recognition, right? Because of her background, although we don't take it against her, but that's her, right? She wanted recognition. And then that's why nakikipag-mix siya sa mga foreign celebrities and so on. Gusto nila na tignan siya ng mataas, in high esteem.
Yeah.
And yet the way they were humiliated and put it out, that was one thing, right?
Yeah.
I think God's justice. And kay Ferdinand, control freak, he controlled everything. And then last minute talikuran ka ng mga akala mo sa'yo. That was painful. I wish there could have been more, pero that was a big punishment in itself, right? I wish there could have been more. They would have been imprisoned or something. But this was something, as you know, I think the Marcos children were also saying they were not prepared for it. They never imagined it would happen. And I think that was like, bang, right? A slap on their face, unfortunately. Right?
Yeah. Yung follow-up question ko, kasi parang, lagi ko tinatanong to sa mga aktivista eh. Parang, they can't answer me. Parang they can give me a straight answer talaga. Parang, number one, why were they allowed to come back? Do you have any idea?
All right. So they had numerous attempts to what they call this one to come back to the Philippines, but because they are Filipino citizens, they have the right to return to their country, right? Except when yung freedom to travel natin yan, it's not absolute. Like nung lockdown, right? Because of health concerns, we are restricted. Even like at times of national security, ganyan. So I think that was Marcos versus Manlapos case na sinabi ng Supreme Court na pag may threat ng national security, they can bar people from entering. But when Mrs. Marcos, I think at that time, returned in 1992 or something, and then she ran for the presidency, she was no longer deemed as a threat to national security, right? So lahat ng that's something I remember, like this is sort of like what's guiding me. Ninoy Aquino would always say used to say that we should be different from those we oppose, right? So otherwise we will be like them, right? So sila Mrs. Aquino, they did not prolong yung exile nila, 'di ba? More than what is necessary. When they realize na hindi na threat, then nakabalik na dahil Filipino citizen sila. Right? So that's the reason, because constitutional right natin yan. Nasa Bill of Rights natin yan na freedom to travel. Right? So that's the simple explanation. Right? Iba yung aspect ng rights na, iba yung aspect ng accountability niya. Right?
Yeah, kasi parang what it bothers me kasi parang tayo lang yata yung bansang who allowed that. Most people, most countries who booted out their dictators don't allow them back, regardless if they consider themselves as still citizen of that country. Parang they would rather have them outside than inside. So parang it really bothered me kasi we wouldn't have. I think it would mean a lot if they don't stay, if they're not here right now. Like we wouldn't have Duterte. Like hindi ko maintindihan din kasi parang how were they able to, parang bawal nga silang pumunta ng US eh. Tapos meron silang cases doon, and then and yet nagamit nila yung pera nila. Nagagamit pa rin nila yung pera nila sa Pilipinas freely. Yun yung concern doon. Parang siya naging threat, di ba?
That's what I was saying, that up to this time we could never tell how much they took kasi the way gastos nila social media, baha check your phone, right?
Yeah.
Check your Facebook, laging ang daming Marcos Facebook pages, so on, promoting this one, TikTok. So ano kumbaga loaded, may budget, di ba? And to think na, again, ulitin ko, ang legitimate income lang nila as of 86 is $300,000.
Yeah.
Right, $300,000. So,
yes.
So anything excess belongs to us, belongs to the government. Could have been used for schools, hospitals. That never happened, right?
I think yung next question ko, punta tayo sa present. Kasi ang ganda ng pagkalatag mo ng cases eh. Parang from there on pa lang, kung meron kakausap na pro Marcos, parang first question mo, ano ba yung salin? Dapat parang meron kang standard na sineset sa conversation. I think yung next na question ko is this coming 2022 elections. Parang how much is the threat na if they come back, kasi sabi wala siyang threat before, ngayon malaki naman ang threat na they will come back to power. How do you feel about this 2022 elections? How do you see it unfolding?
What they call this one? You are what you vote for. And the thing is, if the majority feels that they should be back in power, the minority just have to respect it, right? We just pray that the institutions hold. Unfortunately, hindi siya nag-hold nung time ni President Duterte. If you've noticed, it was only Risa Hontiveros, Laila de Lima, Kiko Pangilinan, Frank Drilon, Trillanes, ang kumbaga ang nagde-defend ng mga interest ng mga tao, like human rights and so on. I mean, despite being bashed, right? And may mga threats sila, and Bam Aquino, and, di ba? So, nag-fail yung legislature natin doon. Ang dapat, ang legislature, Congress and House, sila yung taga-control ng presidente, right? Pero they faltered so many times. Yung civil servants natin, right? So a lot of people are always saying that, you know what, vote during this election. It's a very important election. If you want to change the country, vote the election. No, you can change it every day. Remember yung namatay na COA auditor, lawyer, na in charge sa pagre-release ng mga. Imagine if all government all civil servants are like that. Right? Kung blinak nila yan, this thing, hindi mangyayari ito, hindi aabot sa ganito. Like yung Tokhang, kung hindi sumunod yung mga pulis sa ganyan, because it's an illegitimate order to kill without due process, or yung kung sino mang mga taong inutusan nila, hindi mangyayari yan. Right? So, the big changes or something, direction, happens during the election, pero we could still have changes, right? With impact every day. Depende sa civil servants natin yan, right? So, my thing about the election, you know what? Mood ng tao. Kung ang mga tao hindi na naniniwala na ang pagnanakaw ay masama, pagmatay masama, then that's the way the election will go, right? And you were telling earlier about convincing people who are pro Marcos or something. To be honest, a lot of my friends are saying, kuya mo, kausapin mo si ganito, ganyan. Ang sinasabi ko, my personal feeling, give up na ako sa matatanda. Right? Let's focus on the young ones because like people who have been through martial law and they still like it, God bless you kung halimbawa naging masarap ang buhay mo pero hindi mo bakit nakita nung time na maraming patayan, maraming nagbuto, maraming naghihirap. Right? God bless you if you were fortunate. But how about the other people? Conscience. Right? So a lot of people were saying, masarap ang buhay namin. Yes. I think, you know what? I don't take it against you, but hindi mo nakita na maraming naghihirap at that time. So, konsensya na lang. But then again, conscience is relative. So, yung mga taong nagdaan ng ganyan at ang naniniwala pa rin na tama sila Marcos, dapat ibalik, may legacy, whatever, I give up on them. Right? I would focus more on young people because, I don't know, karamihan ng tinatanong ko, hindi masyadong tinuturo tong martial law.
True.
Right. Ito, in fairness, naalala ko nung, I think, was it like grade 5, we were doing Philippine history. And one of my teachers was really enraged dun sa book namin. Kasi, ang sinasabi niya, maski maraming namatay nung panahon ng Hapon, marami namang kabutihang naduluto. Sabi ng teacher ko, oh my God, parang it's moral equivalency. Parang sinasabi mo, okay lang pinatay kasi may, di ba? So, you have generations of students thinking of that na okay lang kasi may nagawa. It's hindi siya pantay eh. Hindi siya equivalent eh. Hindi siya equal.
I think yung ganyang klaseng argument is the same line of thinking or argument na ginagamit ng communist China when it came to Mao. Like for example, the way they represent Mao was that he was 70% right and 30% wrong. So even though sabihin natin meron tayong 65 million na patay o 100 million na patay na Chinese na because of the famine, doesn't matter. Kasi he still did something right. But that's a false equivalence. Parang yeah. Which brings me to the next question later. Sige, go ahead.
Go ahead. I mean, one thing that really goes against us is yung culture natin. Ayaw natin ng confrontation, very pacifist tayo. I remember like growing up, pag may problema sa class or any group, sabi na, kung sino nag-away, magbati na kayo. Hindi ba dapat alamin muna natin kung sino may kasalanan and hold them accountable? Or magsorry na kasi sa isa. Hindi kayo magpantay. Somebody hit somebody, the other just reacted. So, merong may kasalanan, may nagsimula. Hindi sila pantay. The thing is, to simplify things so as not to offend. At parang maging maayos na, kalimutan na natin lahat, pantay kayo, sorry to each other, kumbaya. Right? So, which doesn't work. It doesn't solve a problem. It just breeds resentment.
Yeah, parang political correctness din siya in a way eh. Parang tayo yung earlier version ng political correctness. Kasi I remember correctly na when I was young, parang so pro Marcos ako before. As in, kasi Ilocano grew up in an Ilocano household eh. So, they see Marcos as somebody na someone to be revered, kumbaga, highly respected because of his intellect. Pero then when I try to question them about it, nagkagalit sila. So I try to see parang and then pagkagalit sila, parang the next thing you know, ayusin niyo na lang. So hindi mo na hash out talaga yung issue about the topic. Hindi nila mahiwalay yung person from the arguments. So then right now the same thing is happening. Parang yung mga ka-DDS, they can't separate Duterte from the things he did wrong. Parang lagi lang, kasalanan niya ng ibang tao. Because yun ang identity nila. The identity nila is Duterte. Which brings me to this next question. I think very relevant siya eh. Kasi it's all happening again eh. Parang where Duterte is just like the same Marcos but 2.0 but some considered as worse. But we would know that after the 2022 elections, if there's going to be one, or eventually, hopefully, there's one. ang question ko dito is that what do you feel what do you think Cory Aquino should have done, ought to have done back then when the Marcoses were voted out? Because if I remember my history correctly, there was a revolutionary government and there was a interim parang before the 1987 constitution. There was another
Mhm.
constitution in
The
between,
Freedom Constitution, yeah,
freedom
right.
constitution, which was considered a revolutionary one, which was good. But what are the things that she could have done better or that would have stopped the Marcoses in this particular era or time?
Okay, I'll be upfront. I think Cory Aquino is one of the best presidents in the Philippines. And to my mind, save for a few, she did everything correctly, right? Let me expound on that one. If you remember, one of the reasons why Marcos was put out was, of course, yung cheating sa election. Diba? So, yung last count ng NAMFREL, lamang si Cory. Okay? Pero hindi ganun kalaki, hindi overwhelming.
Yeah.
Right? Hindi overwhelming. Now, that goes to show na despite what Marcos has been doing, marami ang naniniwala kay Marcos. Marami ang sumusuporta sa kanya. So, bearing that in mind, Mrs. Aquino steps in. She has the military, right? Na formerly allied kay Marcos. They want power. They want a slice of the cake. Okay? And then she also, Mrs. Aquino has supporters from the left, right? Na, of course, at odds with the military. Okay? So she was balancing everything together. Okay? She was balancing everything together. Because ang tendency niyan, usually pag ang dictator nakikick out or something, civil war. Dahil may bad blood doon sa different sectors. Kasi usually ang dictatorship may pinapaboran yan. Right? So may pinapaboran na sector, which is in this case, businessmen, well, his friends, and the military. At syempre may inaapi. In this case, farmers, fisher folks, the poor. Right? Some of them sumali sa CPP-NPA. Ms. Aquino had to balance everything. Right? Her first cabinet was a mix of left and right, all colors from the spectrum. Now, as for the Marcoses, kinuha niyang mga allies din, yung mga loyalista. Right? So, in fact, some of them were part of yung Lakas ng Bayan coalition na. I think very prominent nung time na yun yung Balimbing na naglipatan and so on. Because these people have a hold on their constituencies, sa mga probinsya nila. At the same time, it's worth having everybody in than you have people out and plotting against you. Right? Now, with that in mind na parang peace and reconciliation, si Mrs. Aquino, again, yung sinasabi ni Ninoy, be different from those we oppose. Hindi sila naging vindictive. Kung naging vindictive sa kanila, it's very easy. Would have been very easy. But because Mrs. Aquino trusted the Filipino people to give justice to themselves, right? So, hindi siya very aggressive na parusahan yung mga Marcos. Pinabayaan niya to run its own course. She appointed judges, prosecutors, and so on. Let them do their thing. Dahil may sistema tayo, right? In fact, I think the most powerful president we have based on law, si Cory Aquino, ng revolutionary government niya. Kasi by the Constitution, siya ang president and legislator. Siya ang gumagawa ng batas, siya pa presidente. She appoints everybody. And yet, she was the only one na, under that situation, to relinquish power. Most of these presidents that we had, Ramos, Estrada, Arroyo, lahat sila, they wanted charter change, expand yung power nila, tumagal. Si Mrs. Aquino, parang inip na eh. Parang gusto nang umalis ka agad eh. Diba? She just wants to finish her term. Right? So, kumbaga, such is her faith in the people and in democracy na lagi siyang na-accuse na weak. But because she wants to put in a system. Kasi kung siya ang nakialam, it will be defeating the purpose of why she was there in the first place. Na parang naging autocrat siya. And I think one thing comes to mind, land reform. I believe the land reform thing is a failure. But this was decided by Congress and to a certain extent by the people who elected them. That Congress ang gumawa ng CARP law. People were pushing. I think we discussed this one, yung Mendiola massacre. They were pushing her to sign an executive order because you had the rulemaking power para mag-land reform. Ang sabi niya, no, let Congress decide it. Diba? Kasi otherwise, lalabas akong autocrat. I'm just here to create a system in which you decide what to do. But for me to intervene, it will be defeating the purpose of this revolution. Tinanggal nga natin to dahil lahat ginagawa niya eh. Right? Na walang nagko-control, walang checks and balances. So that's what Mrs. Aquino did. Pass it on to Congress. She had so much faith on the people, at the same time, the system that she built, that she felt she needed not to do that. Pwede nilang ipahanap at ipaano kung sino yung pumatay kay Ninoy, but they didn't want to do that. It would be self-defeating. Doon nila nakita ni Mrs. Aquino na yung role niya is to build an institution and a nation rather than makialam siya for everything. Right? So, people consider her weak because she did not do much. But then again, kaya nga natin tinanggal yung isa dahil umaabuso sa kapangyarihan and you want her to do that. Right? And like big policies like land reform, she left it to Congress kasi dapat pag-usapan ng mga tao, hindi lang manggaling sa kanya. So, yeah, I think she was a purist in the sense that she was conscious why she was there and she did not want to break that trust, right? So yun ang simple explanation kay Mrs. Aquino. As for the Marcos cases, ano mo sa totoo? I think mas umusad yung mga Marcos cases, the cases against the Marcos nung time ni Mrs. Arroyo, right? Kasi naalala namin parang ang nagkaroon ng parang coordination between the courts dyan to expedite stuff because ang tagal-tagal na. Diba? Kaya kumbaga most of the cases came out ng time ni Mrs. Arroyo. Right? Na hindi siya nakialam. Right? So, again, pinaandar na as it should be. Right? And that's why we have these cases.
Ang sad lang parang another thing na you mentioned, the Aquinos weren't vindictive. At the same time, they weren't like the kind of person na they wanted to tell people their mga achievements. Parang it's more of like, let the achievements speak for itself. And yet, again, ironically, these are the things that binabato sa kanila ng iba't ibang grupo. Like, for example, na, failure ang land reform mo. Kaya merong Hacienda Luisita Massacre. Failure ang ano mo. Ang leadership mo, kaya may sa 44 na failure or failure yung revolution mo talaga ng EDSA kasi may Menjola Massacre. And yet again, they are the ones who closed their eyes sa mga massacres ni Marcos back then.
Right.
Yeah, and medyo sad lang actually if I look at because I agree I totally agree with your the way na your analysis on Mrs. Aquino, because looking back, I think it was a very, very thin ice that she has to balance herself on. And
all the time, right?
It was like 12. If I remember correctly, there were 12 coup d'etats. I sabi 7, but then there were 8, and then there were 9, and then there were 12 actually. And then ang sabi ko back then when I talked to the late Susan Kimpo, she told me na she has to play a very, very subtle but politically highly stressful game of balancing everything out. That's why she has to support Fidel Ramos despite Fidel Ramos being able to do this thing.
Jailer of her husband and jailer of her husband, diba?
True.
So you would see yung graciousness ng tao kung kaya niyang lunukin lahat yan para dun sa bayan.
True.
Diba? Imagine, I remember may campaign si Mitra. Kasi syempre, ang pinili ni Cory, si Ramos, hindi si Mitra, no? Ang sinasabi ni Mitra na may time na magkasama sila sa jail ni Ninoy, na naka-blindfold sila, and naghahabilingan sila ng pamilya na just in case, pare, ako mamatay, or something, ikaw na bahala. Parang ganon. Right? And of course, Mitra was close to Ms. Aquino, but Ms. Aquino had to make a choice for the country. Right? Had she wanted to make a choice for herself, she would have gone for Mitra, ever loyal. Right? But because it was the country, it was Ramos. Imagine parang why would you do that? Only for the country, diba? So much respect for the lady, and I think I was telling this when Mrs. Aquino died. I told my best friends, I ko, pare, dalhin mo yung anak mo dun sa funeral march or something. Kasi we will never give a send-off like this to anybody again. Right? Yung outpouring ng support, never. So, true enough, right? Nakita natin how she was received from all spectrum. And yeah, she was honored, and that was very good. And I felt good because at least yung mga Pilipino lumingon at sinabi na thank you. Right? Dude, it was a very difficult situation. I was watching yung mga US series na Commander-in-Chief, and then ano pa yung isa sa Netflix na yung president siya tapos namatay yung president niya tapos siya lang yung natira sa cabinet. This could have been a very good subject for a movie or a TV series, just to tell people like what she went through. True. Right? And why decisions were made. So the thing is, siguro kung sabi mong flaw, it was that she trusted everybody, the people, and then she wanted good for everybody. Right? She could have prosecuted yung mga military, pero ang nangyari, mag-aaklas lalo yung military. Right? Yeah. She could have given in to the demands of the left. But the thing is, aminado tayo, hindi lahat ng Pilipino on the left. Marami, ang wide majority niyan centrist.
True.
Right? So, medyo iffy sa socialist ideas. Although they're not conscious that, what they like is socialist, but because it was branded communist, they don't like it anymore. Right? So, that's a branding image for the left. But a lot of people don't like that. I think masyadong na-demonize ang socialism sa atin eh. So, anyway, Cory was balancing everything. Yeah. Right? I think we discussed this one, yung Menjola massacre. Right?
Yeah, yes.
I remember as a child that there was a photo of Mrs. Aquino marching with the peasants after the massacre. Right? What they call this one? This was actually in a Supreme Court decision about state immunity na hindi porket nagmarcha sa inyo with you si Mrs. Aquino, it means that the state accepted its responsibility or, they said that they're responsible. But just to show you, at that time, 87, people loved her. True. Right? And they know it wasn't her. Right? It wasn't her. So, I just feel bad na the way, of course, the Marcoses can portray her as evil. That's given, right? But for the left to have done it to her na parang laging kailangan, kumbaga parang kung si Chris may Visconde massacre, kailangan si Cory may sariling massacre. Di ba? Parang ganun yung sinasabi nila. So, it's very unfair. Plus, ang pinakamasakit dito yung media. They always portray as if it was Mrs. Aquino's fault. When the records would bear na hindi. They actually, a few days after the massacre, they even went and met with her. I think one of the photos I showed you. Yeah. Right? Tadeo, Lian Alejandro, they met with her. Crispin Beltran met with her. And they were allowed to go through Gate 4 of Malacanang. And the ministers were there. Now, looking back, that's what happened. But looking forward, people say, kasalanan ni Cory. They hated, of course not. That wasn't the case. But people, especially in the media, seem to want to categorize it. Kung si Chris may Visconde, dapat si Cory may sarili ng massacre. Parang, it's not good. It's being, for journalists, that's being lazy.
True.
Right? So every time I see that from ABS or GMA, I cringe. Kasi parang, hindi kayo nag-research. Parang, kailangan talagang laging ipakita na Menjola massacre, it's Cory Aquino. It's not. In fact, it's the other way around. She was, kumbaga, the people cried for help sa kanya. Kung siya nagpapatay, ba't sa kanya lalapit?
True.
Diba? True. And a lot of the tension was also caused in part by the left, in spite of the fact that all the cabinet ministers, relevant ministers, were talking with them already.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So, very, very unfortunate. But anyway, one of the reasons why the left split. But that's for another discussion. Yeah.
True. When Pinoy died, parang I found myself talagang naiyak kami ng asawa ko. Parang we were crying, and then I asked myself why, kasi parang turns out the family was treated very unfairly for me. I think na they weren't given the chance to explain themselves or even the platform to really clarify what were they thinking, what Miss Aquino was thinking, what Pinoy was thinking, why why they did what they do back then.
Mm.
So parang parang wala siyang closure, and until the end of his days, parang bayan pa rin yung iniisip niya. Yeah. So yeah, and hopefully this 2022 elections mas maging okay. But yeah, I agree with your assessment kanina na if that's the majority's will, we have to deal with that. And when that happens, I don't think magiging peaceful yata. Kasi
Well,
yeah.
ako as a lawyer, legal professional, I always put my faith in the system and respect what the people decides on, right? We just hope for the best, but we should be very vigilant with that one, diba? Bantay and so on. And then, as I said, you know what? I'm sure a lot of people will not agree with me. I give up on older people who experience martial law and yet still advocate for it, right? So I would go to young people, at least, kumbaga, hindi natin sila masisisi na hindi nyo alam. Diba? Na hindi tinuro sa eskwelahan. So, pinakamaganda, we focus on young people, explain to them. I actually like this conversation because as, you know, I volunteered to like do these talks to other people. At least, naka-clarify yung issues and na-narrow down kung ano yung dapat natin i-present sa mga bata because they have a very short attention span. Right? Right. And the thing is, I can't dance. I can't do TikTok. I wouldn't go there. I'd love to explain, but my profession dictates that I should go with facts rather than entertainment. Right. You know
Right.
what? I used to have this like side gig nung nasa Pilipinas ako among friends na ako yung comedian, but I can't do that in TikTok. Right. And it's not from. I don't think I can do it. It's not for me. Yeah.
Right. I think doon na ako sa last question, if ever. Kasi napasar pang usapan natin, hindi ko napansin na isang oras at 1 hour and 12 minutes na pala. Kasi ang ganda ng ang ganda ng pagkalatag mo, talagang lawyer na lawyer yung pagkadating. Parang may case ka, reason. So siguro last question ko, ano yung tingin mo mga books na kailangan basahin ng mga tao, mga kabataan ngayon? Kasi sabi mo, ang advocacy mo na, I would assume na yung advocacy mo is to educate the younger generation. Ano yung tingin mo kailangan nilang basahin? Ano kailangan nilang establish?
Okay, that's a tall order kasi what they call, unlike sa US na bawat kibot ng presidente or something may libro, dito sa atin wala eh.
True.
Diba? They should do their own research. To be honest ako, yung picture na pinakita ko sa'yo about Ninjola Massacre took years para mahanap ko siya. They could go to their school libraries, read, but you know, yung pinaka-purest and clear and factual, nasa decision ng Supreme Court. Medyo nakakabagot lang ang basahin, pero it's there, right? I could not see any book at this stage. I think I told you that I was planning to write a book, but out of respect to my colleagues who have done more than I did, sa akin, very small part lang yung participation ko sa cases and so on, I asked them first, pag hindi kayo gumawa ng libro by this time, akong gagawa ng libro. Diba? But you know what, Supreme Court cases, to be honest, you know what, I feel sad for young people. Wala kasi tayong media resources na masyado na ganun eh. And all of our cases are boring. Right? It starts with, this is a petition for certiorari. That sentence alone, you lost me. What is certiorari? Oh my God, parang papa-explain. So, that's why I really want to get out there and help explain to people because resource-wise, maraming biographies. I think si Miss Susan Kimpo has her own book about her family struggles.
Subversive Lives.
Yes. Primitivo Majares, his family, yung conjugal dictatorship, those stuff. But there's more to be desired. More to be desired about this one. Hindi chronicled masyado yung nangyari. Kasi parang may ano ba na parang kalimutan na lang natin. People would rather forget than remember. May sense of shame sa ganun na parang naging biktima sila or something. But you know what? People have to like let this out and let more people know. Right? So at this stage, to answer your question, mahirap sumagot kasi parang apart yung kay Miss Kimpo at sa ilang manunulat natin, parang kulang tayo eh. Diba? Supreme Court decisions, very clear. Right? But again, they're boring. Right? Even for lawyers, it bores me. Right? Certiorari got me. I mean, first sentence pa lang. Diba? Yeah, but you know, as I said, in the future, that's why we had this discussion. I'd like to explain in a less lawyerly and more common person perspective and language, right? So yun lang way natin talagang ipaalam sa kanila through these decisions and the stories of people.
Yeah.
Right? There should be more out there. If pala rin na hindi manalo si Marcos, I think talagang it's due we have a truth-telling commission 'di ba? Naging parang kaya sinasabi nilang Marcos Aquino because Ninoy was the most prominent martyr, but he's not the only one.
True.
Right? So again, nasa media yan because media wants, parang ano na lang, gusto nila padaliin ang buhay nila. Oh, Ninoy na lang at saka Mark. It's not as simple as that. And the Aquinos are not even claiming that. That's why during the time ni Noy, ang daming nabigyan ng compensation ng mga human rights victims. Right? To acknowledge what they gone through. Not to compensate. It will never compensate, but to recognize yung sacrifices ng pamilya nila.
True.
At saka martyrdom ng mga nawala. Right.
Mm-hmm. I forgot to ask. Sorry. Ba't ka pala nag-lawyer?
Ang family kasi namin is nasa legal profession. Right? So, my father himself is in government, and then parang day in, day out, you breathe that profession. So, I said, you know what, parang this is the best way for me to do something na parang reputable at the same time makatulong and so on. I mean, my dad and mama would always encourage us to serve others, help people. So I think the law was like the best way and the easiest way, I thought. But having read these cases since 1991, karamihan sa kanila yung iba sa kanila hindi pa tapos medyo may problema din. And one thing worth mentioning, yung sa sinasabi ko about what they call Chief Justice Corona. A lot of people parang sabi, ang tagal-tagal na niyan, tagal-tagal hindi pa natatapos. In the same decision, Corona said that all of this happened because of the delaying tactics ng mga Marcos. Right?
Yeah, what about that pala?
Right. So parang kung ano ginagawa ng tactics para ma-delay. That was important. At least may recognition from the court na kaya nagtatagal to kasi dahil sa inyo delaying tactics dahil wala kayong may sagot. Right? So every time they would say, ang tagal-tagal, okay, matagal nga, pero hindi kasalanan ng gobyerno, kasalanan ng mga Marcos. Right? And during the time ni President Ramos, they even floated this agreement, parang compromise agreement. Right? Na eventually nag-fizzle out. Right? So that bought them more time. Again, nahabol natin yung 4 years, nahabol natin yung 10 years, na nawala. Diba? So because of their delaying tactics.
Yeah.
Right? Not because government was remiss or something, but because of their delaying tactics. And that's how the system works. So that's for another thing. That's justice system. That's for another thing. Sobrang parang pick up sticks to parang ang hirap lang hindi dinidiscuss. Mabanggit lang. But yeah, Justice Corona said that, you know what, most of this one, kagagawa nyo, delaying tactics nyo.
Mm-hmm. Actually, may mga pictures nga nilalabas sa mga BBM camp ng mga acquitted, wala talaga not found guilty, yung mga case ni Marcos. So I would assume na most of those are because of their doing then, or
right.
Is it, yeah.
What they call this one, first, wala tayong hawak na ebidensya sa Pilipinas for these crimes. I would admit. Because sabi ko nga, ang sino mag-iimbestiga at that time? Ang Congress hawak niya, ang COA hawak niya, prosecutors, judges, appointees niya. So, right, where do you get this one? At the same time, yung time period na nag-lapse, prescription, 10 years. So, para ka pa mag-file ng kaso. Plus, people are forgetting, Marcos is a lawyer, bar top-notcher. He knows how to cover his tracks. Well, most of it. Right? Yung mga sumingaw dito dahil sa yabang nila, papaparty nila, or dahil sa properties nila abroad, or dahil sa sarili niyang pagsusulat sa diary niya, or sa mga bumaliktad. But on its own, it was difficult. The guy is a lawyer. You have to give it to him. So, he will definitely cover his tracks.
Yeah. Pero di ba na na rin yan, na-defraud na rin yung niya? Tawag din, what do you call this, na prove na rin na hindi talaga siya top-notcher by itself. May mas mataas talaga sa kanya at that time.
Alright. See, at when he took the bar, he was number 1. Pero ang pinakamataas si Justice Florence Regalado. right? I think siya yung pinakamataas, and not even I think Marcos was second or something, but he was, dude, that's another story. Oh my goodness. You know what? I strongly suggest that we talk about next time si
Sige.
Justice Senator Jose P. Laurel, and
Mm.
that will explain a lot about Marcos.
Yeah.
And why this all happened. Justice, not negatively, but again, Jose P. Laurel, former president, was like magkaka generation sila nung tatay ni Ninoy. So they have the same trust sa system, same belief, same ganyan. So and then you will see how this all happened. Parang kaya pala nagawa to ni Marcos, kaya pala nangyari to. There's a connection, right? There's a connection, and it's very interesting to have that topic on Jose P. Laurel, which was my thesis when I was in college.
Oh, talaga. Oh my God. Looking forward to that. Kasi siya yung nag-acquit kay Marcos, di ba? Si Laurel.
A short story for that one. When he was a kid, may nililigawan siya, tapos parang nakursunadahan niya, ganyan. Tapos may boyfriend yung lalaki. So nag-away sila. So he used, I think, a cane, nag-away sila, nasaktan yung lalaki. Kinasuhan siya. Right? And in prison, nagsisi siya. Okay? Tapos eventually, I think his town mates or his people, mga Batanggenyo, lobbied for a clemency for him. And then siya, from a bad boy, admittedly bad boy, he changed. So nakita niya na ang mga tao, kahit gumagawa ng masama, nagbabago. Kaya look at all his photos, he has a black bow tie or a black tie. Dahil sabi ng inang niya, ng nanay niya, wear that to remind you of the grace of God na nabigyan ka ng panibagong buhay para hindi ka na gumawa ng masama.
Wow.
So that was his mindset, right? Bad boy na patawad. Enter Ferdinand Marcos, na pumatay daw. He saw himself, brilliant guy. The rest is history. Kaya, maski nag-opposition sila Doy Laurel noon, tinalikuran nila si Marcos back in the days, ng 80s, hindi niya magantihan or something. Utang na loob na doon sa tatay nila yung buhay niya, yung freedom niya. Diba? So, yun, yung mga, politics is not boring. It's like telenovela, drama, and so everything is there. It just has to be said the right way.
True. May mga kabit-kabit pa, asa-asawa, kung ano.
Well, as a legal professional, I would not deal with that. That's gossip, pero that's fun. That is definitely fun.
Okay, so I think this is the end of this. I'm excited for the next conversation. So thank you very much. Ang tawagan natin sa isa't isa is boss. So boss,
yes.
Maraming salamat sa iyong pagpapaunlak, and really looking forward, and thank you very much for this one. Really learned a lot.
Right. All right. Till next time. Till next time, boss.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.